She fired me on a Tuesday. By Friday, their $180 million deal was dead. And I didn't have to lift a finger. You know that smell in corporate offices? That mix of recycled air, cheap coffee, and something I learned to recognize after 18 years in the Marines, pure fear. I'm Wade Crawford, 54 years old, and I'd been dealing with that smell for 18 years at Phoenix Capital Holdings, VP of Risk and Compliance. Sounds boring, right? But anyone who knew how real money moved understood what I really did. I held the keys to every regulatory door that mattered. Look, I never had to raise my voice. My authority came from knowing when to stay quiet, when to tap my fingers 3 times on the desk before making the call that could make or break a quarter. And right now, I was looking at the $180 million acquisition I'd been putting together for 14 months, Martin Reed's real estate empire, the kind of deal that makes careers. I was standing by those floor-to-ceiling windows, checking final compliance reports on my tablet when my phone buzzed. Email from Brooke Manning, CC'd to the entire risk management team. Subject: Urgent, outdated compliance methodologies team. I've reviewed Wade Crawford's approach to the Reed acquisition and identified several concerning inefficiencies. His conservative timeline projections and excessive regulatory protocols are inconsistent with modern M&A best practices. We need immediate course correction to meet contemporary industry standards. Brooke Manning, Chief Operations Advisor. I read it twice. Then I tapped my fingers 3 times on the window ledge. Chief Operations Advisor minus a title so vague it meant nothing, created specifically for the VP's daughter fresh out of Harvard Business School. 6 months of startup experience, and she was rewriting 18 years of proven methodology. My assistant Jennifer Park appeared at my office door, looking like she'd witnessed an accident. Wade, did you see? I saw it. I set my tablet down slowly. The same calm I used to use when supply officers thought they knew better than logistics sergeants. Schedule a meeting with Ms. Manning today. But Brooke had other plans. 2 hours later, I got called upstairs. Not to her office, to the conference room. Power play territory. She was waiting with a manila folder when I walked in. Designer suit. That aggressive perfume that hits you like a wall. 26 years old and convinced she was the star of her own corporate drama. Wade, she said, not looking up from her papers. I think we need to discuss some performance concerns. I sat down, checked my watch, old habit from the Marines. Always know your time remaining. What concerns? She slid the folder across the table. I've prepared a performance improvement plan. Your risk assessment protocols are creating unnecessary delays. The Reed deal should have closed 2 months ago. I opened the folder, page after page of MBA buzzwords and timeline charts that completely ignored federal compliance requirements. It was like watching someone redesign a bridge without understanding physics. The calculations were there, sure, but they were calculating the wrong things entirely. Brooke, I said, using that tone I'd perfected for people about to make career-ending mistakes. Martin Reed's holdings have environmental liabilities dating back to 1987. The EPA grandfather clauses alone require. That's exactly the problem, she interrupted, leaning forward like she was closing a sale. You're stuck in old regulatory frameworks. Modern compliance is about efficiency and risk tolerance. We can streamline these processes. I really looked at her then, saw the shaking hands, the desperate need to prove herself, and the complete lack of understanding about what those environmental clauses actually meant for the deal structure. She wasn't just wrong, she was dangerous. In my head, I ran the numbers. 18 years of reputation versus 1 week of her authority. 24 hours until the next regulatory filing deadline. 48 hours until Martin Reed expected his environmental clearance certificates. She was about to blow up a deal that took me 14 months to architect. I'm not signing this, I said simply. Her face went red. Excuse me? This plan ignores federal requirements. I won't put the company at regulatory risk because you don't understand the complexity of grandfathered environmental assets. She stood up, breathing hard. I am your superior, and you are being insubordinate. This is exactly the kind of rigid thinking that's holding back this organization. I closed the folder, set it back on the table. Then we have a problem. No, she said, voice cracking slightly. You have a problem. You're terminated, effective immediately. The words hung there like smoke from an explosion. I turned to look at her, really study her face. She was expecting a fight, maybe some begging. Instead, I felt that cold clarity I'd learned during my last promotion review in the Marines when they told me I wasn't political enough to advance. 18 years of building relationships, of staying late to make sure compliance reports were perfect, of training junior analysts who went on to better jobs. 18 years of being the guy who made sure the company never got hit with regulatory sanctions. And it was ending because someone who'd been here 6 days thought she knew better. Understood, I said. She blinked. What, you're absolutely right, Brooke. Efficiency is everything. I stood up, picked up the folder. I assume HR will handle the paperwork? She nodded, looking confused. She'd just fired the only person in the building who understood the regulatory maze for the Reed deal, and she had no idea what she'd actually done. Time to find out if 18 years of experience was worth anything in the real world. My office felt different when I walked back in, like visiting a place you used to live. I didn't rush packing up. Rushing looks like panic, and I wasn't panicking. I was calculating. First, personal stuff. Photo of my son Lance, finally graduated from college and starting to understand why his old man worked the hours I did. My Marine Corps Challenge coin that I kept as a paperweight earned it during my second deployment, back when I still thought the military would be my whole career. The coffee mug Jennifer got me that said world's most caffeinated risk manager. Then the important stuff. My personal network directory minus 18 years of regulatory contacts, lawyers, and compliance specialists. Relationships you can't replace with Google searches or consultant reports. These went into my briefcase with a solid thud. The compliance files for Reed's acquisition sat in the center of my desk, technically company property. I left them right where they were, but here's the thing. The real knowledge wasn't in those files. It was in my head. The verbal agreements with EPA contacts about timeline flexibility, the personal guarantees I'd made based on my 18-year track record. The handshake deals that made this complex acquisition actually possible. All that institutional knowledge was walking out the door in about 10 minutes. Jennifer was waiting by the elevators when I came out with my box. Wade, this is insane. Nobody else knows about the environmental grandfather clauses. The board doesn't even know she fired you yet. I'm sure Brooke has it covered. I said, that lie tasted perfect. She's got an MBA. She understands modern efficiency. Security walked me out. Standard procedure, nothing personal. Rachel Webb, head of security, had worked with me for 12 years. She'd seen me stay late during holidays, buying pizza for her team during those marathon audit nights. This is garbage, Wade, she said quietly as we waited for the elevator. You know that Christmas, when the federal auditors showed up unannounced? You stayed here 3 straight days making sure our compliance documentation was bulletproof, saved everyone's jobs. I smiled. The kind of smile you give someone who just handed you a winning lottery ticket while thinking they gave you a parking ticket. Thanks, Rachel. Take care of yourself. Instead of grabbing a cab, I drove straight out of the city to Clearwater Lake, about 45 minutes north. Same place I used to take Lance fishing when he was younger, back when he still thought his dad was the smartest guy in the world. I parked in the same spot by the old wooden dock. Late afternoon sun was hitting the water just right, turning everything gold. Used to bring Lance here on Saturdays when his mom and I were still married. He'd be maybe 8 years old, more interested in skipping rocks than actually catching fish. But he'd sit next to me on this same dock, asking questions about everything. Dad, why do the fish hide when it's sunny? They don't hide, buddy. They just go deeper where it's cooler. Sometimes you gotta know where to look. Seemed like a lifetime ago. Now Lance was 22, fresh out of college, probably wondering why his old man chose such a boring career. Kid didn't know that risk management wasn't about avoiding problems. It was about seeing them coming and being ready. I turned my phone off and sat there for 2 hours. Let them panic in their glass tower while I watched the water and thought about what came next. 18 years of getting up at 5:30 a.m., checking regulatory updates over coffee, making sure every T was crossed and every I was dotted. 18 years of being the guy who made sure million-dollar deals didn't get killed by paperwork. Nobody else wanted to read, and Brooke Manning thought she could replace all that with a performance improvement plan. When I finally turned my phone back on, the thing buzzed like an angry wasp. 14 missed calls, 8 voicemails, 23 text messages. First call was from Lance. Dad, saw the news about Phoenix Capital stock dropping. You okay? That hit different than I expected. Kid was keeping track of my company's performance, probably more worried about his old man than he let on. Better than okay, son. Just started a new chapter. What do you mean? Long story. I'll call you tonight. Then I scrolled through the work messages. Jennifer at 2:30 p.m. Board meeting emergency session. Nobody can find the EPA exemption files. Brooke says they were never properly documented. Of course they weren't on the system. Those EPA exemptions weren't documents. They were relationships, personal guarantees based on my reputation with regulators who'd worked with me for over a decade. You can't download 18 years of trust from a company server. Scott Rivers, the CFO, had left 3 increasingly desperate voicemails. Wade, major communication breakdown here. Call me immediately. We can work this out. Brooks knew, maybe got carried away. Let's not let personalities kill this deal. Personalities. They always called it personalities when someone pushed back against incompetence. The last voicemail was from Scott again, 4:17 p.m. Wade, Martin Reed's people are asking questions. They want to talk to you directly about the environmental compliance schedule. Brooke tried to take the call, but they specifically requested the lead compliance officer. Call me back, please. I didn't call him back. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts to a number I hadn't used in 6 months. Martin Reed. Direct line, 2 rings. This is Martin. That voice carried the authority of someone who'd built a real estate empire from nothing. 61 years old, Korean War veteran who understood the value of experience over enthusiasm. Martin, it's Wade. We need to talk. Pause, both of us thinking. Thought we were staying quiet until the Monday filing deadline. What's changed? The question I'd been preparing for during those 2 hours by the lake. Time to find out if 18 years of building professional relationships was worth anything. I've been terminated. Dead silence. Went on so long I thought the call had dropped. Terminated, he repeated, like he was translating a foreign word. By who? The VP's daughter. 26 years old, 6 months of startup experience. Said my compliance methods were outdated, inconsistent with modern standards. I heard something that sounded like he was either laughing or choking. And who's handling the environmental liability transition now? Nobody with experience. She thinks the computer files are sufficient. Computer files show the Montana assets as money-losing environmental hazards. Without your personal notes and regulatory relationships, their systems will flag everything for disposal within 6 months. That's right. So they fired the only guy who understood the regulatory landscape 72 hours before closing the biggest deal in their history. Martin's voice dropped to that tone I recognized from other veterans, the sound of someone switching from conversation to strategy mode. Wade, you free for breakfast tomorrow? Currently unemployed, Martin. I'm available all day. Good. The Riverside Hotel, 8 a.m. And Wade? Yeah? Don't sign anything with them. No severance, no consulting agreements, nothing. Wouldn't dream of it. I hung up and drove home to my empty house. Lance had his own place now, his own life. Divorce was final 3 years ago. Most nights, the quiet didn't bother me. Tonight, it felt like opportunity. I made myself dinner, opened a beer, and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad. Started writing down every regulatory contact I had for Martin's deal. EPA Regional Office. I knew 4 people personally. State Environmental Board. 2 contacts who trusted my word above any corporate filing. Federal Compliance Review Board. 1 guy who'd been working with me since 2009. 18 years of building these relationships. 18 years of being the guy who returned calls, who remembered people's kids' names, who sent Christmas cards to government employees who most corporate types treated like obstacles. Brooke Manning had an MBA and 6 months of experience. I had Janet Morrison at the EPA who trusted me enough to push through emergency compliance reviews because I'd never lied to her. I had Tom Brennan at state level who knew that when Wade Crawford called with a question, it was worth answering because I did my homework. That's what Brooke didn't understand. Compliance isn't about forms and databases. It's about people trusting you enough to work with you instead of against you. The Riverside Hotel serves breakfast with the kind of quiet efficiency that makes you feel like you're planning something important, which we were. Martin looked exactly like always perfect business suit. Silver hair cut military style, eyes that had built a real estate empire from nothing. They called my legal team this morning, he said, spreading butter on toast like he was performing surgery. I drank my coffee and waited. Woman named Brooke. Sounded like she was drowning. Told my attorney you were unavailable due to a medical emergency. Said you were in the hospital with exhaustion but had briefed her on everything. I set my cup down carefully. The nerve was incredible. Not just a lie, a verifiable dangerous lie that could blow up in spectacular fashion. She's buying time, I said. Thinks she can charm her way through the environmental compliance review. She thinks I'm an idiot, Martin corrected. Thinks I'm a walking checkbook who won't notice details. He wiped his mouth precisely. My assistant Alex did some research last night. HR at Phoenix didn't know about your termination until yesterday afternoon. The board is in crisis mode. Your CFO is having what my sources describe as a complete meltdown. Sounds like Scott. Here's where we stand, Wade. I don't do business with liars, and I definitely don't work with amateurs. The Phoenix deal is dead. He paused, watching my face. But I still need strategic guidance, and I still want you running things. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick document. Not a purchase agreement, an employment contract. Reed Development Group needs a director of regulatory strategy. Salary is double what you were making. Equity is significant. First job minus help me find new partners who actually understand environmental compliance. I looked at the contract. This was freedom. This was vindication. This was perfect justice served cold. In my head, I was already calculating the timeline. Phoenix would discover their compliance gaps by Wednesday. They'd try to hire consultants by Thursday. Martin's people would be asking for the regulatory filings by Friday. And Phoenix would have nothing. No relationships, no institutional knowledge, no way to navigate the federal maze I'd been building pathways through for 14 months. One more thing, Martin added, that predatory grin spreading across his face. I haven't canceled tomorrow's closing meeting at Phoenix yet, scheduled for 9 a.m. Why keep the appointment? Because I want to watch her face when she tries to explain why the hospitalized guy is sitting across the table from me as my new director of regulatory strategy. I picked up the pen, thought about Lance, thought about those Saturday mornings at the lake when he believed his dad could fix anything. Maybe it was time to prove that 8-year-old right. When do I start? You already have. That evening, my phone buzzed with an automated alert that my Phoenix Capital access had been revoked. But then another notification popped up, news alert, about merger delays and executive departures. Word was getting out. Stock was already dropping in after hours trading. I walked out to my back deck, beer in hand, and looked at the city lights. Tomorrow morning, Brooke Manning was going to learn the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical experience. Tomorrow morning, she was going to find out what happens when you fire the foundation and expect the building to stay standing. Tomorrow morning, 18 years of patient relationship building was going to pay dividends she never saw coming. Morning of the showdown, I met Martin in the Phoenix Capital lobby at 8:55 a.m. The building I'd worked in for 18 years suddenly felt like enemy territory, but I wasn't intimidated. I was home. The lobby was designed to intimidate 3 stories of marble, expensive waterfall feature, acoustics that made every footstep echo. But walking in with Martin Reed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I was walking in as an equal, not an employee. I could see activity on the 42nd floor through the glass walls, people moving frantically, lights blazing even though it was barely 9 a.m. Looked like an ant farm someone had kicked. The elevator ride up was quiet. Martin checked his watch, old military habit I recognized. You ready for this? Been ready for 18 years. The conference room was packed when we arrived. Brooke sat at the head of the table in a different white suit, looking like she'd been up all night. Dark circles under her eyes. That aggressive perfume now mixed with the sharp scent of desperation. She had Scott Rivers and 2 board members flanking her, all wearing expressions of barely controlled panic. Her face went completely white when she saw me walk in behind Martin. Mr. Reed, Scott stammered, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. We weren't expecting. That is, we understood Wade was hospitalized. Martin said calmly, taking a seat without being invited. I sat next to him, set my new business cards on the table. Reed Development Group, Director of Regulatory Strategy. Interesting theory because I just hired him yesterday. He seems remarkably healthy for someone supposedly in the hospital. The silence that followed was the sound of a $180 million deal dying in real time. Brooke found her voice first, pointing a shaking finger at me. You can't. I terminated him. For performance issues. He was insubordinate and resistant to modern protocols. You lied to my legal team, Martin said, voice cutting through the room like ice. You told them he was hospitalized with exhaustion. You lied to your own board about his termination. And now you expect me to trust you with $180 million of my assets. I watched the faces around the table, Scott looked like he was having a heart attack. The board members were staring at Brooke like she'd just confessed to embezzlement. And Brooke was realizing that her 6 months of startup experience hadn't prepared her for this moment. "This is a misunderstanding," Scott said, stepping forward with his hands up like he was surrendering. "We can bring Wade back immediately. Full restoration, promotion, signing bonus, whatever it takes." Martin stood up slowly. "No, you can't rehire someone who doesn't want to work for you." He looked directly at me. "Wade, are you interested in returning to Phoenix Capital?" I stood up, looked around the room at faces I'd worked with for 18 years. Jennifer Park was standing by the door, looking like she was watching an execution. Rachel Webb was there too, called up from security to witness the carnage. These were people who'd watched me work late on Christmas Eve to make sure compliance reports were perfect. People who'd seen me train junior analysts, who'd watched me save quarterly reports with smart regulatory strategies, only cared now because their ship was sinking and they needed someone who knew how to patch the holes. "No," I said simply, "I have a new job." Martin smiled, not the polite business smile, but the predatory grin of someone who just won a war. "Then this meeting is over. The deal is dead." He walked toward the door, then stopped. The whole room held its breath. "Ms. Manning, let me give you some free advice. When you're 26 years old with 6 months of experience, you don't fire the guy with 18 years of regulatory relationships. You learn from him." He looked around the room. "Wade didn't just handle compliance, he was your compliance strategy. Good luck rebuilding 2 decades of regulatory trust from scratch." Brooke's voice cracked when she tried to speak. "We have consultants, we have systems, You have nothing," Martin said quietly. "You have files without context, procedures without relationships, and a $180 million deal that just walked out the door." We left them sitting in that conference room, finally understanding what they'd lost. As the elevator doors closed, I could hear Brooke starting to cry. 3 days later, Phoenix Capital stock dropped 24%. News was full of stories about management crisis and failed leadership transition. The board launched an investigation into unauthorized personnel decisions and misleading client communications. Brooke Manning submitted her resignation the following Monday. Word was her father had to pull strings to get her a junior analyst position at a firm in Ohio. I was sitting in my new corner office at Reed Development Group when Lance called. "Dad, saw the news about Phoenix. Stocks in free fall. Board fired 3 executives." "You sure you're okay?" "Better than okay, son. Sometimes the best move is letting incompetent people destroy themselves while you build something better." "What do you mean?" I just got hired to help Martin Reed acquire 3 companies this year. Turns out experience is still worth something in the real world. Mom always said you were too smart for those people." After I hung up, I walked to my window and looked out at the city skyline. Different view from my old office. This one faced west instead of east. Could see the lake in the distance. Same lake where I'd sat 2 weeks ago wondering if 18 years of work was worth anything. On my desk was a photo of Lance from his college graduation. Same one I'd carried out of Phoenix in a cardboard box. Next to it was my new business card holder, mahogany, with Wade Crawford, Director of Regulatory Strategy, engraved in gold letters. My phone buzzed. Text from Martin. "Wade, just got word that Phoenix tried to hire McKinsey consultants to handle the environmental compliance for their next deal. McKinsey quoted them $400,000 in 6 months. Thought you'd appreciate the irony." I smiled and typed back. "Some things can't be replaced by reports. In corporate America, your knowledge walks out the door with you, but only if you're smart enough to take it. They'll call your methods outdated right up until the moment they realize you were the foundation holding everything together. That's not just business strategy. That's life. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and smart enough, life gives you the chance to prove that experience beats enthusiasm every single time. In corporate America, they'll promote your replacement before they understand your value. But institutional knowledge doesn't transfer with a handshake and a business card. The most dangerous employees aren't the ones who fight when you fire them. They're the ones who smile, pack quietly, and take 20 years of relationships with them out the door.